Right, I think we're live now, guys. So, hello everybody, thanks for joining us today. As many of you know, I'm Steve Smedley, Acuity Associate, and welcome to our sixth webinar in our spring series that aims to pick up on white paper themes. In this case, the expectation of customer-focused services. I'd also like to welcome Nitin Palmer and James Edmondson, also from Acuity. They'll be exploring what customer service excellence looks like via timeless principles and good practice, as well as how you go about embedding a culture of customer service. And of course, that's quite apart from the expectation in the white paper and in documents like Together with Tenants, which is all about engagement of tenants and involvement. There's very much that expectation that they get good quality services, responsive services, and the tenants are treated with respect and courtesy. So before I hand over to the guys, just the boring housekeeping issues. This webinar is scheduled to last for an hour. This is the point where I say, if you have a tech issue during the session, use the chat function to get in touch with James, which seems a bit tight, but because he's also presenting, he's got a bit of an appearance today with some of his out of sector experience. But it'll be a good test for you, James, whether you can multitask. So guys, right, if you've got a problem with sound and vision out there, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to get in touch with James, and between James and myself, we'll try and solve those problems for you. The guys will be taking questions as we go. There'll be some logical pauses. So what I'll be doing is I'll be sifting through those questions and putting them to James and Nitin. If you want to post a question, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to post a written Q. Do make it short and concise to the point, because it certainly helps me. I'm not very good at thinking on my feet. So yeah, I'll go through those and I'll put them to the guys. The slides and a recording of this session will be available shortly after we've finished. They'll be posted on the website. So they'll be there for posterity, but also to direct any colleagues who couldn't make it today. So that's enough from me. Without further ado, over to Nitin and James.
Right, good morning, everyone. So thanks for joining us. We're going to get straight into it. We've got a bit of a kind of double act going today, so we're going to see how it goes. Right, welcome to Customer Service Excellence. This is the map. This version doesn't look very good, but I've got a PDF version which looks absolutely immaculate. So it's IT for us, isn't it? But check out my logo, man. I did this by hand, and I think it's not bad, is it? It's kind of, you know, even if I must say so myself. Right, what am I going to be speaking about, and what's James going to be speaking about? So we're going to start off with purpose. I'm going to start off with the dream, and go through beliefs and values and attitude, and you'll hear these three words right through. Trust, respect, and listen. Then we're going to visit the shop and give you a kind of context in terms of, well, who's your average customer? How much do they pay you? How should we regard people who pay us, this kind of sum of money? All things customer service and housing. So yeah, what is it? Who's it that's sort of doing it? Where has it come from? And then we've got this whole issue of culture. So culture that we've kind of inherited in this sector, and then working towards kind of modern culture, from tradition to modern. So there has been this kind of, revolution, I'm calling it evolution, but it's actually a kind of revolution. And then there's been people who've been part of this huge kind of evolution. So people you probably know about who've kind of, absolutely rejected the old or traditional way of thinking and working, and more kind of, modern, friendly, customer-focused kind of service. So Tom Menion, Mick Kent, Sally Jacobson, Mary Gober, Joe Smith, and then all of their kind of leadership and their kind of work, their outputs, their outcomes, their impact, and then translating that into reality, which is where my main man James is going to come in and talk about his lived experience, global. So I mean, I've kind of, I've been in housing for like 35 years. And James has been around the globe, and then, when you hear him, he says, it doesn't matter where you are or who you are. There are principles, they've been tried, they've been tested, they work. We're then going to kind of pause and then look at the dream again, kind of put a kind of reality check to what we've done. And one of the things originally when we were talking about this brief is, Steve spoke about an antidote. Yeah, but can you get an antidote? So I actually figured out, what this means. And I think I might have a kind of answer for this. And then the big question, well, why now? What's changed? So we'll talk about Grenfell and what the kind of impetus is now. And again, revisit some of the words we will start with in our dreams, so listen, respect, then a conclusion of the presentation. So that's the kind of map. And this is the sequence we're going in, Just always start with the dream. Yeah, where is it that we want to be? What's the vision? Where are we now? What's the kind of context? How are we going to move forward? But where have we come from? So recognizing, origins, where we are, and this whole kind of transition, which is what the main thrust of today is about. And again, I get by with a little help from my friends: Tom, Mick, Sally, Joe, Mary, James, Steve, Mark Anderson. I don't know, this is all kinds of people in the, James used to call them, my crew. I call it the posse. It's the acuity massive in the house, man. In a manner of speaking. Yeah, principles. Yeah, okay, been there, done it, got the T-shirt. Still here. And then we'll go back and yeah, monitor, review, evaluate. Yeah, where are we? What's happening? And then a case study to kind of say, okay, and who is it that's really kind of, really progressive today? So East Lothian Housing Association, you might have heard of. And then we come back to this kind of real reality check in terms of why now, and conclusions. And then hopefully we have some Q&A. Usually I prefer to do a kind of 50-50, talk 50, QA 50. But today it's going to be a bit different. So start with a dream. And I'm going to call it my housing association or my HA. And in looking at this dream, what I've done is I've looked at, well, what's happening? Grenfell, Hackett, then the first Grenfell report. Then there is all the sort of work from the regulator, from the ombudsman. And then all of this kind of crystallizes into the white paper. So I kind of really had a good look and saw all the reports and read loads of stuff, and took me kind of several weeks to figure out. I said, okay, if I was to kind of just have one line, what would that be? So this is what I came up with. It's a sustained positive culture, fulfilling a purpose led by a board based on trust and alignment. So this is what's happening in my housing association. So this is the kind of dream. And this is where we're going to kind of start off. But it's a kind of summary of everything that's happening today. Also, I joined Acuity about, 4 months ago. And really all the discussions people have met, all the seminars and webinars and discussions and meetings, all of that is captured in one sentence. Then it's about respect for people to do the best we can with what we have. And that's how we are judged in housing. How good are you with what you've got? We can't be judged for what we don't have. And yeah, what's the mindset? What's the attitude? So these three are really, if you think about it, so there's a belief system. And a belief just means, something you accept as to be true. Whether it is true or not, doesn't matter. If I believe something to be true, then it is true for me. Then our beliefs drive our values, So what are we talking about when we talk about values? So values are things that we're prepared to live and die by. So, things like honesty, leadership, integrity, selflessness, accountability, responsibility. And then we have this whole thing about attitude. And that's what drives behavior. Let me just kind of define what I mean by attitude. And we say, you change behavior, but you can't change attitude. Yeah, but what does attitude mean? What is attitude? What I found out was the meaning of the word attitude is actually the inclination of an aircraft in relation to a fixed point. So how an aircraft inclines, the height at which it flies is its altitude, but the way it inclines towards a fixed point, typically the horizon, is what we call attitude. If we look at it in terms of people, the definition, it's an internal emotional, right? So it's to do with how you feel, emotional orientation that explains a person's behavior. And Tony Buzan defined it as a mindset. So how your mind is set towards a particular goal or direction. And my experience in housing, and I've seen people's minds are set in jelly, so it's like really wobbly. I've seen people's minds are set in water, so they're really flexible, fast, fleet of feet. I've seen people's minds set in concrete. And then the real die-hard cases, I've seen minds set in concrete with a triple titanium casing around it. It's set. This is the way we've done it. This is the way we're going to do it. This is the way it's going to be, and there's no kind of option to change or think different or to innovate or to get creative. But we can't measure attitude without a goal. And if we set a goal, if there's behavior that's moving towards that goal, we say that's a positive attitude, or what I call a can-do attitude. If we have behavior that's neutral or does not engage or move towards a particular goal or doesn't believe or buy into it, then we say that's a negative attitude. So in a sense, it's all about people's attitudes. Remember, I said it's an internal emotional orientation which explains a person's behavior. And this is about trust and it's about respect. Like people don't care, who you are until they know that you care. So it's, how do we kind of treat people? How do we care for people? So let me just define the word respect. And the word respect comes from the Latin word specto, to see. And when we add the word it means repeat or regarding, meaning to see from both sides. So that's the origin of the word. If you saw a dictionary would tell you it's to hold someone with an attitude of deference, meaning you see someone and you consider them to be a worthwhile person, they're worthy of your consideration, they're worthy of your regard, and you show them deference, in terms of, worthwhile human being. But they say you've got to give respect to get respect, and that goes back to the origin of of the word again. And check out my specto, man. Believe it or not, these are Gandhi's original glasses. Hey, but that's respect in it. Okay, so if it's about attitude, then we want to look at what is the goal? What's the vision? What's the picture of what it looks like, where we want to be? And then how we get everyone moving in that direction. So you might have, people at the kind of top end in an organization committed, work all days, hours, do anything, everything they can to move towards that vision and to fulfill it. And then you might have people who are kind of going in the complete opposite direction or kind of, just wobbling all over the place, we don't know. So it's really kind of very important if you just, in terms of, if you look at this picture, And with the regulator, for example, this is what they want. They want to have, okay, is customer service in the organization, is it driven from the top? What's the alignment like? What's the prevailing culture? How are people kind of regarding each other? So that's what alignment means. And it's quite a kind of, well, I suppose this is a kind of strategic kind of framework to kind of think about, but it's important to have the framework and clarity of purpose and focus. So the shop, I'm going to set up the kind of, the kind of context for what I'm going to be speaking about for the rest of the time. Now, if you look at a shop, as a housing association, well, what do? Well, we have homes, we have income, the turnover of the business, we have staff. So that's the first thing you do at looking at, what's in a particular shop. Then the perspective we have is, well, who are our customers, and for whom are we doing all this, the number of homes, the turnover, the business, the staff. So how long does an average tenant live in a rented social housing home? Well, 20 years is not an unremarkable time, but let's go for 5 years. Say average rent is £100 a week. In 5 years, they would have paid you £26,000. Can you imagine, spending £26,000 with any business and what kind of service you would expect to get? And this is the perspective we should see our tenants, okay? Right? Okay. It may be sometimes, they're difficult or whatever, but hey, they're paying us to keep us in business. So how should we treat someone who's paid this amount of money to us? So I'm just going to use this as a kind of, as a point of reference through the session. So far I've just outlined what it's about, having a dream, and I've crystallized what the current kind of thinking is in the whole of the kind of sector. We've looked at attitude, we've looked at respect. So where has all this kind of stuff come from? And I'll start with the word service. And lo and behold, the word servitium, in Latin means slavery or servitude. And the original meaning of the word was how, slaves served, their masters, the sequence of food on a table. That's the origin of the word. Over the years, there's been all kinds of evolutions of this term. So it then moves into, service in a profession, like the military service. Then it moves to a platform, on which to perform a service. Then there's a Middle English kind of take on this, and when I saw it, immediately I said to myself, goodness gracious me, we're British here, we can't be talking about, all this stuff, anyway, but that's the actual meaning of it, So service, we know what service is, but what about a customer? Well, a customer, I learned, from one of something like 600 people who went through this customer service excellence training that I was responsible for in Hammersmith and Fulham. And one day, one person came up with this definition, he said, well, who's a customer? It's anyone we come in contact with. I said, you're right about it. Could be anyone, you just don't know. Because if we say, tenants, okay, primary, yeah, but hang on a minute, what about staff? People in other departments. So it's how we relate to anyone and everyone. Once you are in the shop, anyone who we interact with is a customer to us. So anyone we come in contact with. Yeah, but what about service? So if we combine customer and service, it means providing help, advice to our customers on our offer. What is it that we are selling? What is it that we are providing a service for, or what we call inputs in this regard. Really important to understand the difference between, customer service excellence, which is, that your outputs are more than what the customers want, so exceeding kind of expectations. But then on the other side of the coin is the word complaint, and complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction which needs a response. That what we're selling in the shops not met the expectations required, and therefore something needs to be done to fix it. So we spoke about the shop, and I'm going to call this the zone of respect. The fact that you walk into your office is that automatically that's this zone you enter into, which is the zone of respect. So we respect each other, our customers. And if you remember, the definition is, an attitude of deference, that we see someone, yeah, okay, but it's being able to see it from both sides, that they need to see it from our side as well. Meaning if it's something they want that we're not selling in the shop, okay, you're not going to get it. So where has this whole idea of kind of, a kind of zone or an office or specifically housing come from? That when you come into the housing world, and if you think about your first job in housing, mine was, I was a housing welfare officer on the Stonebridge estate in Brent. So it's literally, you walk into a culture and you inherit this kind of culture. So where has this come from? So originally the culture in housing was come from the Cadbury's factory, where the 5-day working week originates. The reason for this evolution was people would not come to church on Sunday. And like that was not a good idea at all, in the Cadbury's factory. So people were given time off on a Saturday to do anything and everything they had to. So there was no excuse for not coming to church on Sunday. So we have this 5-day working week. Then 1926, Henry Ford decides that he's going to set up a factory where people are going to be doing shifts. And he's going to pay, double the going rate. So, people would be paid $5 an hour. And imagine in those days, how big a deal that was. So it's almost like, this became a kind of global norm in terms of what times, we are there for service. And I remember in the kind of, so this is where the kind of culture comes from. In the 70s, when I first came to this country, it's like, I remember going to a shop and I was literally just like 2 seconds late. And the shop, they closed the door in my face. And I said, gosh, I'm going to be without milk, for like the next 12 hours or so. I got to wait now, So there's this whole idea of, what are the kind of office hours now? So now the office can be anywhere. And with COVID, we know, you wake up and you are in your office. So we're working from home. So there is this whole kind of tradition and culture that we have kind of inherited. And if we look at today, the reality today, hang on, we have tenants. It's a 24-hour society. Tenants work late shift. There's 0-hour contracts. And we can only do kind of viewings, during office hours, what kind of universe are we talking about? And the other thing that kind of happened from COVID is, a lot of people have suddenly had to change their whole kind of mindset in terms of, okay, we couldn't do that. To, oh my God, we better get, people, they need to be able to do the job. So it's almost like changing. Okay, gosh, we didn't know things could still work. You didn't have to go to the office to kind of deliver your services. Welcome to the modern world. And the remarkable thing, and this is countless meetings that we've had, we have our benchmarking meetings, staff have actually risen to the challenge because they've been allowed to do so. What do we do about this kind of culture and the fact that we inherited in this sector and that we are in this kind of transition phase? So it comes down to lead a ship. Okay, this person is leading a ship, so this is the definition of leadership, or what leadership looks like. This is what it is. So let me well say hello to my few friends, Tom, Mick, Sally, Mary, Joe, James. So Tom Menion was one of the first kind of people at the Irvine Valley Housing Association, and he came across this housing association in Omaha, in Nebraska, where the association found that the most important thing to their customers was the cable TV, and they linked their rent payments to cable TV. They found that by linking it to cable TV, they had zero rent arrears. Everyone pays their rent. Everyone loves cable. Do not touch my cable, man, right? So he used this idea and presented it to the housing world. They did an assessment of the organization. So Salford's not the most beautiful part of the world. And what they found was they're spending 80% of their resources on 20% of their customers. And they said, that's not right. So what about all the kind of silent majority, all of our kind of valuable customers, we're doing nothing for them. So what is it that we can do? So he asked this question. And then in a housing sense, we would usually talk about voids and arrears. So the voids, they were spending £100,000 addition every year to their void works because the properties were being returned in an appalling condition. So they top sliced their budget. They said, okay, it's going to cost us £1 million, right? In 5 years. Sorry, it was £500,000. Okay, so then they said, okay, we will top slice the budget. And by top slicing, they introduced a reverse deposit. So you get the money back that you haven't paid if you leave your property in a good condition. They reversed it. So they found that by spending a top slice of their budget, that their properties began to get returned in a better condition than they were. Eventually, they ended up saving 80% on their void works by spending 80%, by spending 20%. The rent arrears, they introduced Gold Star service. So you got kind of, £1 back for every week your rent was paid back. And they reduced their rent arrears by half, whilst all their peers were going upwards, their arrears were going downwards. Completely transformed this whole idea. So reverse deposit, that's the money they spend, the rewarding. So how do you think, right, the traditional culture in the housing world looked at Tom Menion? They thought he was bad. They thought this was what, you're giving tenants money back for money that they should be paying us anyway? And Tom said, yeah, okay, it's just good business, but look at, what the outcomes are. Look at what the outputs are. Look at what the impact is on people. So he said, well, I got to do what I got to do, and you got to do what you got to do. Mick Kent, how to win friends and influence people at Bromford, took issue with serial and malicious complainants. They would follow them up. They would find out what had gone wrong. What was it in the shop that was not working for them? And they would get them to, by genuinely listening to them, they would get them on side to hold, Bromford, to account. So they turned, like serial kind of complainants, to champions holding the landlord to account. So, well, is this one of the antidotes that we talk about? Should we get, a real kind of challenging customers on side? Sally Jacobs on the London Quadrant, not happy with the service they were providing, and she said, no, not good enough. So these are all kind of people who kind of, you know, rebelled against the kind of, you know, the traditional, the culture that prevailed. That we can do better, you know, we can innovate, you know, we can find out. And she got hold of, you know, someone completely, you know, different, you know, Mary Gober. And a lot of people have been through, you know, Mary Gober's kind of training. It's literally to kind of work on the mindset, to change people's kind of mindset so they're flexible, that they understand. And yeah, well, how do you treat someone who's paid you 26 grand in 5 years? Right, yeah, well, with an attitude of deference in it. So this whole idea of, yeah, positive, you know, first contact, you know, your mindset, you know, the words, the terminology, and that was the kind of way to excellence of service. Then a few weeks ago, we had a speaker called Jo Smith at one of our benchmarking clubs. And her title is, you know, she is a tenancy sustainment officer. So she works, you know, with tenants very close and uses an inside out approach, you know, whereas, you know, your Tom, your Mix, your Sally, and they're all kind of outside in. This is like almost kind of, you know, from inside to outside. You know, first time with tenants, vulnerable tenants, and then she spoke about a person who was a hoarder. And to engage this person, she had to listen, understand, use a counseling model till she managed to get his trust. And eventually managed to get him engaged. You know, this is someone who would not want to talk to cleaners to clean out his house, you know, just to give the person a bit of dignity and respect, and to see it from his side, and completely transform the way, you know, this person's life works. You know, otherwise he would have been on the street, homeless, you know, way, you know, long time before her kind of interventions. So these are all people who don't do tradition, you know, don't believe in, you know, it's like, you know, it's about the person and how we focus our kind of attention. So what's the impact that these people have had? So Tom Menion, right? He kind of, you know, completely shifted the whole culture, you know, so is responsible for a paradigm shift, you know, from traditional to modern culture in housing. And this is one of the few. So if you know, they ask, you know, who would you like to meet up and have a chat on a bench if you could pick anyone, living or dead? You know, in housing, I would say Tom Mannion, and Tom passed away a few years ago. I was actually at a conference, you know, sandwiched between Roy Irving and Tom, but I had to do. I stood at I did my session. I had to go, so I missed meeting him, but then Tom is he took on everyone, you know, with all the sort of flack he got. And yeah, it's all about kind of, it's all about our customers. Mick Kent, right, Bromford, customer focus, everything's about customers. Tenants are part of the solution. So social housing, we are one of these few industries, right, where, you know, we work with our worst customers, right? But what about the best ones? So that's what Tom kind of, you know, changed the mindset about. And then seeing tenants as part of the solution. And by demonstrating practical leadership, you know, walks around, staff talk to him, he phones staff, says thank you. Meanwhile, Mary and Sally at London and complete change of culture. Joe, look at the added value, and I think this is something that Steve would kind of, you know, resonate and this probably talks to you about. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, what's the impact that Joe's had, right? Preventing this person from being homeless, improvement in health of that person, right? Reduce cost to the NHS, downgrade, you know, fire risk, hoarders, you know, very, very high risk. Yeah, how? Well, personal leadership, right? It's like it's literally genuinely listening and respecting people. And how many of us know all these different Joes? We've got Joes all over in housing. I've worked, every organization I've worked in, there's always a Joe in the house, right? And I call these pockets of excellence. We are really great at doing a lot of this stuff. However, we also need to kind of progress and keep up. So where is all the kind of experience that's happened? Okay, so what is the lived experience? What this means in practice, or what is the manifestation of everything that I've spoken about? So this is a very famous saying by John Keats: nothing ever becomes real till it is experienced. You can talk about it all day long, unless you do it and you experience it, it means nothing. So let's listen to James and his lived experience, and then embrace the principles he's going to talk about. Well, presenting live and direct, my main man, James.
Thank you, Nitin. Yeah, so I'm James Edmondson. You probably all know me from benchmarking clubs. Previous to Acuity, I had 27 years experience working in customer-facing roles. I started in hotels when I was 16, did a bit of retail. I did 23 years working for an airline in first and business class doing worldwide routes. And I've also been a telephone interviewer for Acuity. So I've had a fair share of dealing with people in many different circumstances. And a couple of years that I did as a telephone interviewer with Acuity, I had some first-hand experience of the feedback from tenants and what's important to them. So I'm here to share my experience, as I feel that good customer service has definitely worked for me as an antidote to complaints in the past. So firstly, when I was asked to take part in this webinar, I questioned, how do I put good customer service excellence into words, as it's something I've been doing for so long. It's just sort of second nature. So I had to sort of step back and think, where have I received good and bad service and how it made me feel, and what I thought people did well or might not have done so well, or what I would have done differently. And I think that's quite a good tool for all of us who work with customers, to sort of step back and think where you've had good and bad customer service. And also, in regards to doing the webinar, I did sort of think, well, how would my experience be relevant to sort of your sector? But actually, basic customer service principles are universal, across all organisations and industries. So it is relevant to everyone, really. And as Nitin said, customer service isn't about those paying for a product necessarily. It's everyone we come into contact with. So our colleagues, everyone in that shop that Nitin sort of spoke about, it covers everyone, really. So with that in mind, I came up with some customer service principles that I've been using over the years. So yeah, Nitin's got the slide there. So I'll spend quite a short time just pointing out what might be quite obvious, but we've all been in situations where even if one of these principles wasn't followed, it might have impacted our overall experience in sort of a not so good way. So we've all had days where ourselves or colleagues might not be on best form. So these principles will just pinpoint what we should be doing as an antidote to complaints. So the first thing you'll see on the slides, it doesn't matter, a high-end brand does not necessarily equal good service speech bubble up there. That's about sort of getting good customer service. It isn't automatic because you might be paying a premium for something or using a big brand name. I've had shocking experience traveling once, I did once in a lifetime holiday in business class. Awful experience, but I've often get very good experiences in my local supermarket. So the whole sort of brand thing doesn't necessarily cover what is going to be good customer service. So first impressions do count. It really does take such a short time to win over a customer or put them off. That initial sort of interaction that we have can be a deal breaker, especially if someone's had bad experience with your customer service in the past. The amount of time that I've had, oh, you're nice, the last person I dealt with was pretty miserable. After that, you've pretty much won, because any issues going forward should be pretty simple to deal with. So then next, I've got sort of being available. This I feel is quite a big one, quite an important one. Just to be there, having that ease of contact, to feel like an organisation cares about you. None of us like to wait, do we? So being on hold in those long automated phone lines, or in a queue where no one's clocked that you're waiting, that's examples of not being there. You just want to be acknowledged, if anything. That's the main thing. Just if someone acknowledges you, said I'll be with you, or yes, it's about having the resources if you've got web chats or just more staff. You know, again, in the supermarket, isn't it great when they open that other till for you? You know, it's always such a great feeling. So I think being there is being available and being there is quite an important one. Thirdly, I've got being approachable. So this is having the best placed staff that actually want to be there, that enjoy sort of dealing with people and want to deal with customers. As a customer, you want to feel that staff have time to deal with your inquiries and that they're invested in you and they've got a genuine interest. That's always quite a big thing I've used in the past, to have a genuine interest in their inquiry, in what's important to them. It comes down to sort of making a customer feel valued and that you actually do want to help them. Just to paraphrase from Darren Hartley from Tarot Trust on his webinar last week, he sort of spoke about just because you might not have lots of complaints at your organisation doesn't necessarily mean you're doing an amazing job. It might just mean that your process isn't that good. Your complaints process might not be that good or that simple, and people just can't be bothered then to complain and they give up. Having more complaints might just mean that tenants feel you're approachable and they feel that they can give sort of their feedback to you. So that's always one to think about. So next we've got keeping the customer informed. Communication, big word. There's obviously key with any customer service, you know, offering, whatever you're doing, communication is at the heart of it. Ensuring you can get back to your customers, try and give them a time frame of what's actually, you know, going to happen through the process, so they know what to expect and when, and they're not left hanging. Even if there's nothing to tell, it's always appreciated to hear that, isn't it? You know, when someone says, look, I've got nothing more to tell you, but I will when I can, sort of thing. So keeping people informed, you know, that is quite an important principle. Next, we've got taking responsibility and managing expectations. So taking ownership of situations that actually deal with the issue and inquiry and not fobbing off the customer. That, you know, that comes back to being that available, approachable thing. Try not to use a no straight off, even if it means going back just to check on something and coming back to them. So doing your best so the customer knows you've made an effort. It's always appreciated, even if the end result isn't exactly what they might have hoped for. The amount of times in the past I've been asked for an upgrade on flights, fully well knowing I can't give them an upgrade, but I'd go away, spend 5 minutes in the galley pretending I was doing something, come back to them and say, I'm very sorry, I've checked, but I can't give you that upgrade. And they're happy. But if I'd have just gone, no, it's not going to happen, then, you know, it's a completely different circumstance. Also, with sort of taking responsibility, managing expectations, give staff enough training and tools to be able to deal with situations fully. It's infuriating when you feel that staff can't actually deal with things very well. That they don't always have to ask someone else, or, you know, you need to have the right spectrum of experience and knowledge within a team just to get things dealt with correctly. And it is worth investing in and motivating customer-facing staff, as they are often the first point or the only point of contact with the customer. So sort of give them the empowerment to exceed expectations sometimes. Then we've got keep promises. Ensure the customer actually gets what they've been promised. Do what you say you'll do. Don't overpromise, you know, because that could lead to letdowns and obviously then poor satisfaction. But I don't really champion the sort of under-promise to over-deliver thing, because I think it's more just about always doing your best and doing what you say you can and will do and following that through. Where possible, like I said, follow up with customers, obviously depending on the case or the issue and your resources. You know, you can't go back to every inquiry, but it's often quite nice to have someone just check, so was that all okay? You know, did that work out for you? So lastly, it's the last few points. Customer's always right is such an outdated saying, not really relevant, I don't feel anymore. But getting to a point where you've done your best and the customer feels that you've done your best, it should be key to helping sort of mitigate complaints there. Take a look at your own customer service offer. Be honest with yourself. How would you feel if it was you being a customer or a family member was your customer to your organisation? To be your own customer. Treat customers how you'd want to be treated. You know, again, with the airlines, we always used to say, you know, in that seat, that could be your mum, your auntie, whoever, you know, and it doesn't matter if they're sat in 1A at the front or down the back next to the toilet. You know, it should really be the same across the board, how you treat these people. Good customer service reflects on your organisation. So, you know, ultimately, then your reputation. So whether it's how you deal with repairs or complaints processes, or how easy to get in contact with you, it might just be to have nice staff. It just covers all these things. So most of these principles, they're driven by ensuring the customer feels valued and that their inquiry and issue is as important to you as it is to them, which I understand is all easier said than done. Thank you.
Oh, well done, James. Way to go, man. Yeah. So if you think about what James has said, you know, and we say, yeah, gosh, you know, you can imagine, you know, Sally and Mick and Joe, and, you know, they would all resonate absolutely with, in fact, that's what they've been doing, isn't it? So it's just like, you know, James has a much kind of big arena compared to, you know, people just in the housing sector. So really, it's been tried, tested, it works everywhere. Okay, but can you bottle it? Can we kind of just give people, you know, every day, you know, a kind of, you know, a shot of this before they get started, and you have one of the sort of bottles that you carry with you everywhere? Well, you can't. You can't bottle this stuff. What you can do is you can model it by thinking about all the things James said. But if you think about it in terms of your personal experience, the best experience you've ever had anywhere, and the person who served you, what were they like, and you wrote down all the qualities, and then you picked on one quality that you could do effortlessly yourself, all you'd have to do is just then apply it, and then just be your best self at all times. And really, it's that simple. But the trick here is, you know, not to tell anyone, because you don't want to bring your ego in it. Keep your ego out, just be sincere, you know, and you keep on applying it till you make sure, you know, you are in alignment in the organization you're working with. And also, you know, this stuff is, you know, contagious. You know, people, you know, look at colleagues, you know, in terms of, you know, peer feedback, really important. How are we going? So coming back to work in progress. So remember I said a sustained positive culture fulfilling a purpose led by a board based on trust and alignment. That is the ultimate kind of, you know, dream to have for an organization. And that's your belief system. And then the values is respect for people to do the best we can. Then how we come across is a reflection of our attitude in terms of, you know, of course I can do it. So what's happening at my housing association now? Well, in my housing association, everyone listens to. Everyone, you know, follows, you know, James's principles. You know, everyone exercises personal leadership, and everyone works together, and staff are listened to and given choices to work. So yeah, okay, you've now got a choice. You can work at home or your office, wherever. So what are the kind of common themes in all this? Well, sense of direction, purpose, allowing people to be the best they can, making sure people have, you know, an attitude, you know, I can do it. But if you're good now, doesn't mean, you know, you're going to be good forever, because things change. So it's the sigmoid curve, you know, so always, you know, when you plan, you know, your strategic framework or strategic days, or even daily renewal, it's like, you know, usually performance, we start, we get better, we improve, we peak, and then down curve. Okay, that's what you call the classic bell curve. The trick is to kind of catch yourself before you get to your peak or at your peak, and then develop another kind of pathway to kind of improvement. So because that is about never-ending improvement. A case study is the East Lothian Housing Association. So this is quite unique in a sense that, you know, all the kind of services and everything is aligned, their whole kind of processes and systems, and by going online, they are the leaders, you know, as far as I know, unless you know of someone else. Then they do like, rent discounts in their key tenant scheme. They are a true 24/7 business. They don't buy into this 9 to 5 culture that we've kind of been inherited. They get, fast services to their tenants. A massive increase in feedback, whether it's positive or negative. Yeah, people have something to say about the offer. 98% satisfaction in being kept informed. They listen. Well, when I came across this and was doing this research for this session, I said, Tom Menion is still alive, It's like, yeah, he took a big gamble. And now, the Gold Star service, that was his idea in housing. So what about this whole thing about an antidote to complaints? Really, Steve, it's like, come on, man. It's like, how can you have a kind of antidote for complaints? We've got the regular Duncan, right? Duncan, it's like, you need to have, how else are you going to kind of improve your service if you don't, if you don't make a mistake? Just tell me you're not human, it's like, right? So, what about all this idea of kind of customer service as an antidote? Well, not really. It will make it easier to deal with complaints. It will make you more aware. It will make you more alert. It will make you more focused to get the complaints resolved. What about all the other kind of things with regards to kind of listening and so on? So, well, let's look at the language. Let's talk about the line of respect. And how it feels to be above, feel really good, or being put below. So this is the language you'll hear, if you put someone on top, above the line of respect. Helpful, good, thank you, appreciate it. What about below the line? Angry, aggressive, blame, excuses, frustration, useless, waste of money, poor communication, hopeless, defensive, rude. This is all the language I've heard from Grenfell. This is all the stuff you hear where, you get good customer service. We can literally just change how we talk to ourselves, a self-talk, and literally change our attitude in terms of how we kind of inclining towards something. These words that I've kind of underlined in italics, this is actually taken directly from quotes that tenants have made about their landlord in the way they're kind of receiving the service. So did they listen? Well, clearly no. Was there any respect for their tenants? We're talking of someone's paid you, like people have been living there for 10 years. What, 50 grand they've paid you as a customer? Like, you call them aggressive? And that you signed with your contractors rather than listen directly to what your tenants have to say. So all of this is now crystallized in the white paper. And what the white paper is saying now is, yeah, you're going to have to listen now, or else, So you've had Tom, you've had Mick, Sally, Mary, Joe, James, they've all been, you've never listened to any of these people. The word listen is mentioned 14 times in the white paper. What about respect? Well, respect is mentioned 23 times. This is really the mindset that we are looking for, or the white paper saying, but now they're saying, or else, so now we're going to kind of enforce this. So we've got the regulator. The regulator talks the same thing. So remember my opening? Everyone is now focused on this. So today is really an opportunity to make the kind of changes we want. We certainly know from anecdotal experience, staff have risen to the challenge because they've been allowed to. So really, in terms of conclusion, well, how well is your organization aligned? So does everyone know what they need to do? What's the mindset? Are we all positive in moving forward? Remember the sigmoid curve? Yeah, the thing is, you can fix something, but you've got to make sure it stays fixed. Look at what happened in the COVID lockdown, right? Boris said, fixed it, yeah. Well, only to have another lockdown. Look at the situation now, potentially another lockdown. So when you fix something, you've got to make something, it needs to stay fixed. This is what a sustained culture is about, because people come, people go, people move on. Yeah, but if new people come in, they come up with their own ideas. There's always this sort of kind of transition that we have. So yeah, if you fix it, make sure it stays fixed. Otherwise, it can't be sustained. And yeah, you're only as good as your competition, because other people are evolving, other people are creative, and other people are changing. So it's really about housing. We're a hope industry, and it's this journey of hope. We specialize a bit on the side with cynicism, but it's all about hope. So let me conclude with a short poem. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. Thank you. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Nitin and James. Yeah, well, another broad-ranging one. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody wanted to come up with some questions using the Q&A function. I thought we had a lot. I thought the principles were really great things to just hang service on, and there's some useful practice pointers as well. And I think it's worth remembering that East Lothian isn't a massive association at all. I think they've got something like 1,300 stock. So this thing, it is possible to do this stuff at scale. Just whilst we were waiting for any questions, I've got a quick one, Nitin. I thought I was quite interested in your slide where you I think it was something like belief systems and values and attitude drive behavior. Yeah. And you also mentioned about how when you join an organization, you're kind of inducted into their culture and the prevailing attitudes. And certainly my first job had an awful, it was for a London council, and it was a terrible attitude towards customers. But that was the notion of customer service that I was inducted to. And I remember being a bit outraged and insulted about it, because I came from kind of a council housing background myself. So any clever ideas about how you change the attitude of those staff that don't seem to be very customer focused? Yeah,
I think you try, how to win friends and influence people. The Mick Kent method. It's like you've got to take your worst serial complainers and almost kind of work with them, listen to them. What is the actual gripe, and then get them to kind of change to your kind of offer, to your way of thinking. L&Q, even really dramatic. When Sally Jacobson first took up this kind of issue, they found a lot of staff were just not buying into this whole thing. So they restructured. They said, no, okay, well, you're going to have to apply for your own job again. The world's changing, we are changing, we have a new vision. So you're going to have to really change your mindset, to get aligned with where we are heading to. So a lot of organizations, that's what they will eventually do, is like, look, man, we'll do everything we can with you. What we can't have is, shoddy service to our customers, and if someone's paid you 26 grand in 5 years, and this is your kind of, attitude towards them, you need to find, something else to do, So it's really between those two. I'm more kind of, the school of Mick Kent is, how to win friends and influence people. Yeah, I was telling James that, when I was 17 years old, a friend, gave this book to me, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And you know what he wrote in it, to Nitin, who doesn't need to read this book. I said, all right, okay. And the thing is, you know, the chap who gave this, he is a multi-billionaire in Kenya. It's like, you know, it's like, wow, you know, and he's followed all the sort of, you know, principles of it, you know, and I've followed all the sort of stuff around it, you know, and so has Mick Kent, you know, you can just say how they've tried to get people to change their minds, you know. And, you know, occasionally, you know, 9 out of 10, you know, you will have that one person you can't do business with. And, you know, they have to go, you know, I'm sorry, you do everything you can and then some, and then try all the different ways, you know, persuasion, money, reward, encouragement, support, guidance. And then you have to throw them off the bus, you know, it's like, yeah. In fact, we once hired, you know, this is Joyce Batten, you know, who's, I think she's chair of CIH London branch or something anyway. But we were interviewing people, and you know, one thing she said is, yeah, and sometimes, you know, you got to hold people's hand, and sometimes you got to kick butt, you know. And we hired her for the kick butt when I worked at Astra. So it's like, you know, you can do your best, whereas some people, you know,
yeah,
it's not going to work.
Understood. So I ideally you recruit the right people.
Yeah.
If people aren't prepared to be persuaded, ultimately. Performance management. And now, interestingly, I saw something on, I think it was Notting Hill Genesis website, which is quite interesting because they took their values as an organization, and they and obviously those values are a primary tool for determining the desired culture of the organization. And what they did with those values is they set out for different tiers of staff the kind of behaviors that they expected, behaviors/competency. And a lot of that was customer focused. So, I mean, if people want to do some slumming around Notting Hill's website, if they can find that, I think people find it interesting because it essentially it's a way of, if you like, performance managing culture, I would say. And no, I think it's just good that you didn't mince your words there, Nitin. You know, no, frankly, because, you don't want those people in your organization.
No, because, you know, they become toxic. It's like, you know, literally you'll have, and especially at kind of senior management, it's really bad. Yeah, because you literally get someone they just suck all the energy out of the room. You know, it's like, you know, it's like everything is negative and so on. Yeah. And, you know, there's a very famous saying in housing, we say, you know, we used to hire people for their skill and then fire them for their attitude. And now we've kind of, you know, smartened up, okay, we'll hire you for your attitude and then fire you for your skill, because once you have the right attitude, you can skill up to anything you want.
Right. Brilliant. Right. We've overshot by a little bit, but hopefully not too much. We've got no questions in, so I'm going to call it a day at that. Thanks both again for all your efforts that you put into that. I think it's really useful. Again, it's another one of those presentations that can be used as a toolkit back at the ranch. As I've said earlier, both the presentation and a recording of this will be available on our website. Thanks everyone for attending today. We've got our final one planned for tomorrow, which is all about thinking through how you might meet the environmental / green agenda, which I know everybody is starting to think about. So without further ado, thanks everyone, and hopefully see you later at one of these. Bye-bye.